All right, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of SuperFreq. It's a beautiful snowy afternoon here in Idaho, and it's wonderful. Candles are lit. It's a good day to record. And I wanted to dedicate this podcast as we approach 100 episodes, which is really crazy and super awesome. I'll have to figure out something fun to do, but in the meantime, I'm going to talk about dimensions, which came off of an inquiry from a one-to-one client that I have that's doing the high voltage mentorship / sovereign system combo. And it was a good question. So I sat with myself and had an extended dialogue to make sure that I could explain it in a way that landed with anybody who's listening, whether or not it's someone who's been with me and doing the work for a while or someone who is newer to what this language set is, which is a very different language set, as you know. Quantum psychosomatics and frequency work, the work that I'm doing and I'm helping you guys learn for yourself, is rooted in science first and then bridges over into spirituality, and then like one kind of moves and begets the other. So it really is about bridging these two worlds and having it be very grounded in a way that people can understand. So hopefully the kind of dialogue that I went back and forth with my highest self, and I want to talk about what that means, the highest self, a little bit before I get into talking about dimensions. And then I had basically asked what I thought you guys would ask to ideally make it more relatable and approachable. So with that, let's get into it. So I'm going to go into 3 parts. First, I'm going to talk about the highest self, not your higher self, but your highest self. And then I'm going to talk about how I see dimensions. And then I'll go into the conversation that I had with myself with dimensions, which just allows me to tune into a higher frequency of information in order to be able to translate it and then simplify it. And then I'll talk about how we get limited from being able to expand into other dimensions. So first, to kick things off, I'll start with the definition of the highest self. So you're going to hear a lot of people talking about the higher self in spiritual communities because it's something that people feel is outside of them and it's kind of over there. And then they have to be and do a ritual in order to be able to connect to their higher self and get some type of direction or information on what to do next. And I'm constantly kind of having you guys cultivate this very atrophied muscle of this innate and perpetual intelligence that is running in you, and it's also in the field all around you, and it's everywhere, connected to everything all the time, because it's all algorithms, essentially. So the higher self, quote unquote, is a version of you that's operating within a very specific dimensional order. It's a level of intelligence that you're able to connect with now that's plugged into you now. And it's a self-sourcing, constantly being able to automate itself and re-energize itself. It's like having a battery that automatically recharges itself when it gets low. It doesn't need anything unless you continue to give that power away and you give that battery away to other things. So when I started talking about connecting to your highest or higher selves, whatever, I made sure to talk about the highest aspect of you, because innate and perpetual intelligence is constantly learning on itself, because consciousness to me is information entropy, which basically means it's one big computer that's constantly learning on itself. That's essentially what source consciousness is. It's cycling and learning and constantly evolving. And we are too. And so the highest expression of ourself never needs an upgrade, never needs to learn anything else. It's already connected to the highest expression of everything, of all that is, from eternity to eternity. It is already a part of that. Where we come in is we're not accustomed to holding that level of information in form. Think about information that vibrates extremely, extremely fast. Frequencies that vibrate extremely fast turn into light. Frequencies that vibrate very, very slow turn into matter. So very, very high vibratory experiences are just you being able to make yourself available to higher levels of information, right? Good feeling, joy, things like that. And then the work comes in being able to embody what that information is. And your level of awareness is predicated on that embodiment, which I'll get into in a minute. That was just like a small summary of higher self versus highest self. It's really just intelligence and then your ability to be able to understand, listen, and trust that intelligence and embody that intelligence. So with that said, let's move on to consciousness and these higher consciousness topics rather around dimensions. So D1, essentially the first dimension, is the realm of pure consciousness and point of origin. You're going to hear about pure consciousness a lot, only because it has a varying degree of quality within each dimensional order. So just for the sake of keeping things very simple, just know that the first dimension is the starting point of existence. Okay, it's pure, it's undifferentiated consciousness. In this dimension, there's no form, there's no space, there's no time, there's nothing. It's the primordial, let's say, point from which all things arise, a singularity of potential. So I'm going to move out and go up a little bit higher with knowledge here. So when we collapse the wave function in work that I'm doing with you guys, and this is advanced, it's okay, just listen to the frequencies behind what I'm saying and then re-listen to the podcast again and you'll be fine. So when we collapse the wave function, I'm collapsing it down to a one-dimensional experience and then moving it in to pure source, like moving it into the void of everything, of nothing, of the all that is. So that first light, like what came first, right? Sound or light, like the Big Bang, the point of existence, all began at the first dimension. So 1D is kind of this nothing, no form, no space, no time, and it's the primordial point from which all things arise. It's a singularity, it's potential. Think of it as the source or seed of all creation, right? In essence, it's of oneness, no separation, only the unified field, 1D, okay? 2D is the realm of duality and structure. And I know a lot of you guys are already going to be tracking for several dimensions, and then it'll get kind of interesting for you. At least it was for me when I kind of tuned in and got very specific definitions. So the second dimension emerges when that singular point begins to experience duality, the beginning of differentiation. In this space, you experience only two coordinates, okay? Height and width, creating flatness or surfaces. So for example, take a piece of paper, okay? Just take a plain piece of paper. Here you have this piece of paper and it's on a table. Okay, there's the first dimension. The second dimension is you drawing an image on the piece of paper. Okay, now you've got height and width. You have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with an image on it on a one-dimensional piece of paper. 8.5 by 11, a one-dimensional piece of paper because you can only look down and see the image. What's also present in this two-dimensional experience is duality. You have light, dark, you have positive, negative, you have yin and yang, depending on the culture. It's where balance and opposites first become perceivable and where patterns start to form. So our patterns are really turning into something in this particular dimension because there is this quality of duality. So in this dimension, at this level, consciousness begins to explore basic forms and structures. Still, without depth or time. It's important. This is the realm of like basic and very simple dualistic forces where each force mirrors or complements each other. Then you move into the third dimension, which is the realm of space, time, and individuality. So now you take that piece of paper and you pick it up and then you can see it from different vantage points. You can actually see depth. And what the third dimension introduces in terms of structure and framework is it creates this dimension of time. So it takes all the possibilities of information from the first and the second and puts it into a linearity. So moment to moment, framework by framework, split second to split second, etc., in order for the experience, those who are experiencing, the experiencer, to have conscious awareness of what is experiencing. So this is a way for us to not to have everything happen all at once. It's for us to be able to enjoy and learn and grow. And it's very difficult to do that, number one, in a body, but it's also very hard to do that when you don't have a simple structure, especially with this level of density in it. So you can imagine walking into a big, huge arena, and full of the arena is 5,000 screens, flat screens playing loudly, movies, loads of movies, just images being thrown at you all at once. And you're supposed to know the narrative of each, exactly what's going on, get a handle on it, and then get the lessons and be able to record the lesson, remember the lesson, have an intimate experience of the lesson, etc. So you can see how that would cause kind of like craziness, right? Our brains wouldn't be able to take it. It's overwhelming. But without the density of the body, we can understand at a different level because we are pure awareness. The body makes things denser because we need to be able to have form in order to experience space and information. So to encapsulate this, really it's the third dimension is the world we most directly experience height, width, depth, and time. This is where physical form comes into full expression and matter exists. So it's the realm of individuation. So we each have an individuated experience from source, from the single point of inception, where separate identities emerge and experiences themselves as distinct. In 3D, consciousness experiences linear time, cause and effect, and physical boundaries. This is the dimension where we engage with the material world, our bodies, and the perceived reality of space and time. It is also where our mind and emotions work through patterns of experience conditioned by past influences. So this is just a bunch of stuff that I'm writing down. I have notes on this one. Usually I riff and with some notes, but this was important. So from here on, shit gets interesting. So the fourth dimension, okay, this is the realm of time, thought, and emotional awareness. The fourth dimension is usually described as the space-time continuum, and you'll hear a lot of healers or spiritual people talk about how they've moved into the fourth dimension and you're moving beyond the linear construct of time, or they've had spiritual experiences where they've seen themselves in a different dimension. So they'll shoot out of the third dimension and then perceive themselves almost looking outside of their bodies from a non-linear space-time continuum. Okay, it's just a continuation, a timelessness, a timeless experience. So they will experience themselves without the confines of linear time and have a very different perspective because their awareness is in a different coordinate of time. And when you have a different coordinate of time, you have a different perspective, you obviously see things differently, including yourself. Something else to note too in the fourth dimension is that there is no past, present, or future. There's no past or future. There's just the now. It's just a present moment all the time. You're in a timelessness experience. In this experience, the fourth dimension, which many people are moving into, you start to experience time as being very malleable. You actually start to understand thoughts and emotions govern this dimension big time because they create an energetic field. They influence the field. They create waves and pulses through intent. And so when you integrate fourth dimensional awareness into a third dimensional experience, this is where everyone says your thoughts create your reality, etc. It's very true. That's a true aspect, but it's not enough because unless you're actually moving into the deeper layers of clearing patterns that are transgenerational, your thoughts are still going to be produced by the distortion patterns that are running in the background. So what you can do utilizing fourth dimensional awareness is you will be able to reference, let's say, experiences that you've had in, let's say, a past or a future, a potentiality, let's say, and then you would identify or be able to identify the corresponding patterns. The fifth dimension, or 5D or D5, however you like to say it, is the realm of unified consciousness. and spiritual awareness. So that return to unity is something you guys hear me talk about a lot. And it's that love frequency, that recognition deep within you that you're not separate. I talk about Christ consciousness a lot. Let's say that particular origin of information, that Christed consciousness it's an information, let's say, database that originated in the fifth dimension. So when I talk about tuning into the fifth, like I did with the Christ consciousness call, and the being, like a Yeshua or a Jesus type frequency, that was a deep conversation, if you will, in a very deep level resonance with the fifth, and being able to pull information and translate that. So in this dimension, the veil of separation really begins to thin, and a new level of awareness kind of emerges. You begin to experience interconnectedness with all of life, and you really tune into a higher frequency. You tune into frequency-based awareness, and it's love, compassion, harmony. Those are very prominent frequencies of the fifth. It's marked and, let's say, governed by the recognition that all things, all matter, and all energy is interconnected. You're less identified with being with the individual self, and you become more aligned with the collective consciousness. So many of you can kind of feel the collective consciousness. I'm always asking, even myself, like, is this a collective thing I'm feeling, or is this mine? The concept of time, for example, becomes more fluid, and the experience of the present moment is very heightened. So you kind of shift from ego-driven existence to the highest self, and you want more purpose, and you are driven by that. You've wildly given up free will for divine will. These are some of the types of things that when you fully station and move yourself into the fifth, you will experience that. And that separation just becomes obsolete. You may ping, in resonance between, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, whatever. You have very different pings of moving into like a higher expression of yourself and like a more dense expression of yourself, or you can feel like there's a drag, or there's, a neurological delay where you can feel like you're depressed, but you're like, that's not me. I know that I'm not, but I'm feeling this. Like there's just weird background malaise kind of all the time, and I can't quite shake it. Like that is very keen information. That means that the body is wildly behind time, and like literally a quick acupuncture session, half an hour acupuncture session, cold exposure, NSA, something to get you back into the present moment in terms of body work will catch that body right up. So I'll talk about that at the end of the podcast though. So once you kind of are moving into this like, oh wow, everything is one, and I'm in this deep sense of presence, and I'm, love, unity, and pure consciousness, you start to continue to condition the body to be able to hold the resonance of that. So you might ping and have these great expansive experiences, and then you're kind of back into living your life in a, that has all this constant expansion and contraction. And then you just condition the body with the spirit to be able to hold that level of resonance continuously all the time. And then from there, you start to manipulate matter, and it becomes really, really interesting. I'm talking like quantum tunneling, where you change the frequency of something and it instantly changes in front of you. And we've started to see some of that. You're starting to see a lot of technology come in with, like, I call it deep state holography, which is like how Tupac can come on stage, where they're taking these renderings, they look seemingly so real, and then projecting that onto a stage that's literally a hologram. Okay, that's holography. So imagine manipulating using and understanding hologram physics, holography physics, basically. Say that technology becomes available in the fifth and the sixth and beyond, I'll say. So the sixth dimension is essentially the realm of complex thought and consciousness. So here, all possibilities of creation are held simultaneously as thought forms with infinite creative potential. You have access to not only your own thought and experience, but also the thought forms of others in a collective co-creative kind of flow. So when I'm connecting you to your highest potential, a lot of you guys, I'm connecting with your information, with your highest potentiality from the fifth and beyond. The sixth dimension is also a place where you know that there are alternate versions of reality timelines, and you should be able to access those for yourself, or you're starting to access those for yourself and then manipulate and move and create and bring those frequencies and that information to you. Essentially, you know that it's both and here, that there is this possibility of all creation that is held simultaneously with thought forms and infinite potential. And then you insert yourself into that potentiality. The seventh dimension is the realm of expanded emotion and energy. I see a lot of people who are, or star seeds, I'll say, that come in through the Pleiades, for example, who have very, very high empath programs and are deeply sensitive people that have a very deep longing, and they have this huge heart field, and they end up having really, really tough time being around people, being in public, or they have a lot of public eye on them, and it becomes very, very distorting. And I say that because a lot of the star seeds and light workers come through the Pleiadian version of the seventh dimension because they're here to learn and master their emotions. The emotional mastery realm, okay? Emotion is experienced here as like pure energy, and it can be extremely overwhelming, right? And it's shaped and then transformed in real time. That's essentially what the seventh dimension offers you. It transcends individual emotional responses, and you experience basically all patterns of all of the unified field, not bound by personal story or experiences. Essentially, the seventh dimension is the dimension of emotions, and it's about emotional mastery, energetic flow, healing, understanding how emotions ripple out, how they affect others, how to manipulate these energies to create a harmonious experience in the body. And at soul level, you connect to the universal flow of energy of all things in the seventh. So imagine if you don't have a good handle on your own emotional mastery, feeling the emotions of the collective. That is nuts. It's very, very heavy. I've actually had to reprogram around that. I didn't have a huge empath program myself. Part of my learning actually was to allow myself to move more into the emotional experience of things. So I've actually had to draw from the seventh dimension to kind of activate joy, learn how to receive. That's what the seventh helps me with, like how to touch more, how to get more in touch with my own heart field, because I came in through the ninth, which is very like emotionless. It's like a higher dimensional beings. It's like all technology in the ninth, which I'll talk about in a second. But I've had to really lean on the emotional aspect and learn about the emotional aspect. So I've had a lot of emotional people in my life, and, I would balance that out. I would kind of look at my friends or family and just be like, she's just hysterical. Like, what? I just didn't understand it. So what helped me a lot with understanding emotions and activating that compassion again, because it was so kind of traumatized out of me in a way, was working with animals. So I've definitely been called to work with horses soon, and getting back into like my Chinese medicine practice, which has been really awesome too, to tune in more into very, very, very specific organs of the body. And I'll talk about that in the Pattern Academy, but let's move on to the eighth. So the eighth is the dimension of soul level understanding. It's where soul consciousness expands and integrates more into its divine blueprint. Best way I can describe that. This is where you understand your purpose. You understand your purpose across all lifetimes. You understand your identities across all lifetimes, your experiences. You know why you're here. You know what you're here to overcome and why you chose this embodiment. It is a very deep level of understanding and a very deep level of acceptance in the eighth. Like, you understand the assignment, you're here to fulfill the assignment, and you're doing that with a bowed head and a bent knee. So the ninth is the realm, if you will, of unity and collective consciousness. So this is where you have a lot of multidimensional hybrid races that live in unity and harmony with one another, because the veil between the individual and the collective dissolves. This is the dimension of pure unity, where literally the self merges with the collective, it's the understanding and experience of all beings as interconnected threads of the same fabric. There is no separation, only oneness. This is where that truly, truly begins. This is dimension where you can access the window of the collective, past, present, future. This is the future timeline stuff. Like if I need technology and I want to know future stuff, I go to the ninth. It's essentially where you tap into the wisdom of the planet, the universe, and beyond. It's collective healing, it's integration, it's the universal blueprint, essentially. And you'll see, let's say, channelers or beings that will represent themselves as they'll project as a certain image. Even though it's all frequencies, everything behind the third is just all frequencies, bandwidths of information, and then those frequencies create a projection of a form that they've agreed matches their own, let's say, internal blueprints. So like if you look at the Arcturians, for example, which sounds, I know, really crazy to say, but if you're already on this podcast, then you're open to all of it. So by the way, all this stuff, the first contact stuff that's coming out is not real alien stuff. It is not higher intelligence stuff. It is a totally manufactured creation of like a government psyop, essentially. I think a higher level consciousness beings are already here. You could already access them. There's no here or there anyways when it comes to moving beyond the third. It's just all different levels of information that is creating different levels of vibration and form. And if you're able to see that form because of your level of resonance, you always see that. There is no separation. Your reality quite literally changes. Your perception of reality changes the higher your vibratory experience, because you have access to more information, because you can take in more light. And it's not even about being the highest vibe. It's also limited by how much light you can take in, because we perceive this reality at the speed of light. And our spectrum is very narrow. It's very limited. So I have to close my eyes to actually see through the reality to get different levels of information at times, because we're all very limited in a very limited spectrum. Like there's sounds and light and information that we cannot perceive in this reality because of the laws of physics and how it's governed. And that's changing. The more we all collectively raise our consciousness, the more access we have to different bandwidths of frequencies. But for right now, if we allowed more light in, or different levels of light, or different colors and things like that, it wouldn't make sense for the collective right now. So for example, those who have synesthesia, I think that's how you say it, sorry, they see a different color spectrum actually. I've kind of done a little tuning in on a couple of people that I work with who have children who are synesthetic, and the technology is actually quite brilliant. They'll describe things that you can't quite understand because they're seeing it very different. And you're going to start seeing a lot more of these younger kids that are coming online very, very early, because they don't have a lot of the same baggage because of the collective data dump that happened a little while ago. The newer babies, the higher consciousness babies, have all of this crazy different levels of gifting. It's very exciting. It's just a very exciting time to be alive, even though it feels really, really dense. So the ninth is the collective and the universal blueprint, and then your relationship with all of that. And it's all beings getting along without all of these low vibrational emotions that we experience here on Earth. There's no power struggles. There's none of that stuff in the ninth, although there are beings that have been, let's say, moved into a shadow aspect of the 12D, which I'll talk about in a minute, that they don't have any manners and they've been controlled. And so that's where you're going to see that there are higher level beings and different levels of intelligence that don't have the best interest for humans. Moving on to the 10th dimension is that of divine harmony and balance. It's also the dimension of very high level mathematics. So when quantum computing actually picks up even more intelligence, I wouldn't be surprised if it's blasting itself right past into the 10th. So if you look at pyramid technology, free energy technology, all of that is going to be 7th, 8th, and 9th. And 10th beyond, specifically the 9th and 10th, but like really deep physics and mathematics. To me, this is where Tesla was starting to tap into, is very high level downloads of 10th dimensional, ninth dimensional mathematics and technologies. It's extremely, extremely primitive here, like very, very, very primitive. And if you go to places like China or even places in India, the level of efficiency, specifically, I'll say in China, Hong Kong, deep Asia, where they've put technical supremacy in the forefront of their development, it is quite literally like living in the Jetsons. And even that is primitive when you tune into the 10th and the ninth frequencies in terms of what's available and what we can do and things like that. So the 10th represents divine order and harmony of all things. It's the dimension where the laws of the universe and a lot of what was created for this reality was kind of developed. It's divine intelligence, and it's perfectly synchronized and harmonized. It's a state of perfect harmony. It reflects the highest potential of balance, peace, and interconnectedness. So when I really want to move into that aspect of myself, I call on the 10th dimensional version of me to try to create that type of harmony, peace, and balance. The 11th is the dimension of pure light. It's pure consciousness. It's formlessness. It is the space, or let's say it's the dimension where separation between form and formlessness becomes utterly non-existent. It's pure light and pure consciousness, a space where energy exists as infinite possibilities without any structure or form. So you, let's say, drop the body, okay, and you're pulsating at a very, very high frequency, and you just go into pure nothing. And just imagine all you see is just radiating light with no form, no structure, all the time, constantly. There's nothing to experience because it's just a singular state of everything, of nothingness. Similarly to the awareness of the 10th around interconnectedness, the 11th is that pure, let's say, awakened potentiality of that interconnectedness. So it's awareness that all dimensions, all experiences, and all timelines are part of the same eternal oneness. And that awareness is fully embodied within itself. So if you think about, let's say, the 6th through the 11th, those dimensions are like this invitation for us to process deeper self-realization, expansion, mastery over thought, emotion, and your own energy. It's a different level of journey of integrating, let's say, higher wisdom, emotional mastery, and soul level understanding. You kind of ultimately return to oneness of the 12th dimension, which I'll talk about in a second, with the first. So it becomes this own kind of rinse and repeat cycle of remembering unity and having coming home to yourself feel like it's happening for the first time with the first, and then you cycle through each dimension, getting more and more clarity on what it is you came here to actually experience, who you are at soul level, greater understanding of the universe and yourself within it, the cosmic blueprint, your own blueprint within it, and then ultimately total and complete oneness. That by the time you actually get to the 12th, when I say get, because it's not a linear journey, it's just an expansion and contraction, this is the realm of cosmic unity and source consciousness. So you're in the realm where all dimensions converge into a singular unified field of consciousness. So time, space, and form no longer exist as a separate concept. You are completely singular onto itself. So from a mechanical perspective, that means you holographically know how to project yourself the same in its purest form in your blueprint level as a fractal of the divine with the highest level knowledge of all of the different frequencies of the 1st to the 12th in all dimensions from eternity to eternity. You know how to project that level of consciousness. So when someone believes, let's say like in a Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and they cross over and they see the reflection of Jesus, right? Or what they would perceive as a Jesus frequency or a Buddha frequency. They're like, Jesus met me when I passed. You hear some of this in NDEs. What that consciousness is, so right now you've got advanced beings that were brought into that time to usher in a new level of awareness that know how to project their consciousness into a form for that individual to understand itself. That's the knowledge I'm talking about. So in this dimension, it is pure, unmanifested potential. Consciousness aware of itself, unbounded by and limitless. There's no limitation here. It's the source from which all realities and timelines emanate and are created. There's no past, there's no future. It's the eternal now. So when you're moving into the eternal now, it's moving into the deepest aspect of who you are, where there is no separation between self, other, observer, observed, creation, creator. There's just full, unmanifested, absolute potential. So when you move into D13 and D15, which is divine creation and expression, this is where you get into like some of the divine archetypes, cosmic intelligence, where you've got different levels of advanced geometries, sacred geometries, Fibonacci sequences, fractals, like understanding a completely different language of mathematics and physics, I would say, is your D13 to D15. So it would take a level of understanding, of deep understanding from D1 to 12 to be able to navigate the knowledge or the level of complexity all the way up into, you can go, there's infinite dimensions, right? But if I was just going to do this one duplication and go up to like D24, like for example, D19 to D21 would be the realm of like cosmic evolution and conscious ascension. And it's just an evolutionary consciousness. You've got a different level of evolution happening beyond the 12th, that is the matrix of our own constructs that we're living in. So anything beyond that, you've got different levels of understanding, different levels of mathematics, different levels of frequencies. And I could probably do a part 2 on that, but I'll take some questions on that before I do that. But I was curious about a question in terms of stations of consciousness, which is what I thought you guys would ask, because you guys have heard me talk about this. How do the dimensions relate to stations of consciousness? And the kind of response in terms of knowing came back, which is each station of consciousness represents the shift of awareness. So it is the awareness that you are perceiving the information that you're perceiving. It is literally at the most basic level, it is the awareness of the self as separate to the ultimate realization of oneness with source. So look at the dimensions as a framework. Okay, there's their structure, their framework, their frequency, their resonance. Your station of consciousness is the awareness that you're stationed there. That's the best way I can describe that. So the consciousness represents the awareness itself, and then the dimension is a knowledge base. And then once you're aware that you have the knowledge or you have that knowledge base, then you're becoming aware of yourself. And then the more you become aware of awareness, you create more dimension. You create more dimensionality within yourself. Therefore, you can access more dimensions. And then the embodiment, which is what we really came here to learn, is you basically merge with that dimension of information. That's what the embodiment is. You connect with it, you have these great expansions, and then your body calibrates to that expansion. So if 1D holds the foundational information of existence and is experienced as pure awareness or presence, you would merge into that knowing. And then 2D holds information of duality, polarity, light and dark, good and evil, etc. And consciousness experiences itself as separate, dualistic. So then you understand that and merge into that, right? And then you transcend it. 3D holds the information of form, linear time, and physical matter and consciousness. I'll say consciousness identifying with individuality and personal experiences. Then you merge with that. 4D holds information about time, emotion, and mental states. And then when you merge with that, you begin to grasp how these things all affect reality. Then you transcend into the 5th, which holds information about unity, higher consciousness, and spiritual connection. And you merge with the collective. And then from 6D to 12D, you essentially are merging with more complex layers of universal and cosmic laws, purpose, interconnectedness of all creation, consciousness merges, etc. So in essence, you become the witness, the actor, the framework, the director, the writer. You're playing all these different characters within your own reality because you can see it from all these different vantage points. And then you become the observer, observing the observer, observing itself. And that is dimensionality, which is why I love this topic so much, because it is fascinating and complex and ever evolving and infinite, and you can never master it. And the idea is to kind of continue to merge and embody, and then you become the co-creator, and then you become the interactor and the transformer and the evolver, etc. So I'll leave you with this, in that the key challenges in integrating all of this is because there's physical resistance to higher frequencies. We have trauma stored in the body. We have all these subconscious blockages and patterns we're not aware of. We have epigenetics. We have the very thick, dense illusion of this reality. We have all the distraction. We have energy body expansion happening at the same time for those of us who are, in tune to that. We have ego identification. You've got all kinds of crazy shit going on. So the more we can stay embodied, the more we can pay attention to what we give our attention to, kind of the faster we narrow and shorten that expansion contraction phase, and we move more with ease. We experience more synchronicities. So quantum psychosomatic, obviously frequency work, is essentially the solution to embodying higher dimensions within the body. Take the body with you. So if you feel like there's a drag, and if you're really struggling emotionally, that's a neurological nervous system issue. So you got to catch the nervous system up with all of the changes. Many of you have done so much, you've done so much frequency work, and you're continuing to blitz it and do so much frequency work that there's a delay. The body's having a drag. So feel into what feels the best for you and what you actually can afford to do. For some of you who are on a tighter budget right now, I'll tell you a story about instant manifestation. And this is when I had just kind of hit a bottom, one of many that I've had in my life, but I hit my knees. I could tell you what the grain of the wood looked like on the floor, because I was just completely out of ideas. And I was so frustrated, and I had applied for a trillion jobs because I was too nervous to continue my entrepreneurial endeavors. This was over a decade ago. And I remember I needed $100 to get the balance of my rent paid, enough food for the next couple of days, and at that time, a sliding scale session for acupuncture. And I was like, whatever, I'm just going to have to pay late and hopefully some work comes in. And I just had completely surrendered and given up. And I was cleaning out my closet to see if there was anything I could sell. And I was looking through all of the pockets, and sure as shit, I found a really old purse, and I was going to sell the purse to try to make money. And I ended up not doing that because I was like, I should keep this. It's a good omen. I opened it up and there was $100 in it. And it was an instant manifestation. I had cleaned out a bunch of the same stuff months before, and maybe I just didn't look in this one, but literally it was exactly $100. It was a fresh, crisp dollar. It wasn't even a round one. It wasn't even rolled up. It wasn't thrown in. It wasn't washed. It was nothing, but it was the last thing at the bottom of this pile. And I was just looking through anything, cleaning things out, because again, I had this pile that I was going to try to sell and see if I could finish to get my rent paid and have this trajectory. I knew I needed to get some body work done. I just knew, I don't know why. I was like, I just need to get into my body and chill, and I'm going to get some acupuncture, and maybe I can do that. But I also need to get at least $30 of groceries or $20 worth of food for the next 2 or 3 days, like beans and rice. And it just showed up. And that was enough for me to have the belief I needed that something was bigger than me looking out for me, and something could actually, that this shit was real. Magic was fucking real. And I was like, how the hell in my darkest, deepest moments, I moved all the way into a completely different instant manifestation experience. And I was like, fuck, man, this is insane. I was like, I need to know what this is. I need to figure this out. But I'll say that don't quit before the miracle. Don't quit. I took everything I had after that. I've told you guys this before. I just had this level within me where I just took whatever I had or whatever I came across and I completely invested it always back into myself, whether it was body work or coaches or whatever, always, constantly. And sure as shit, like 2 days later, I got a design job, a graphic job, not a full-time one. It was a one that came through like a freelance work. And I think it was just like a business card that I was going to design, but it was like $150. And I was like, great, I'm on my way. And then it just kind of started from there. They gave me another referral, and then I got a website job, and then that website job ended up covering my rent. And then I kind of picked up momentum again from there. But I have had so many moments of where I've had like just hit rock bottom so many different times. And I've had so many moments where on the outside, it looks like I'm just fucking smashing it. And then on the inside, I feel nothing. And so it is constantly this wave of your relationship with yourself that creates your own vibrational experience that is predicated on where your consciousness is stationed within what dimension. That's kind of how all that ends up working. Your relationship with yourself is how much information you can take in about the truth of who you are into the body, and then create a feedback loop from that, which kind of I feel like is a good place to end this podcast. If you guys have some questions, comment on the podcast and I'll take them and I'll do a part 2 on this. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you when I see you next. Take care.